that's the end there of that initial reaction or media briefing by the ANC's national spokesperson, Thuli Madonsela, basically saying the ANC has noted the Constitutional Court ruling. Of course, it's the first that the party is faced with. They are going to study the judgment, and this weekend, the National Executive Committee of the ANC, when it meets, it will then discuss this. And in the interim, we don't know what's really going to happen because, according to the ruling, Jacob Zuma, the former president, has to hand himself over to the police to start his 15-month sentence on Sunday, which is in 5 days from now, or failing which 3 days later, the police minister and the national police commissioner have to make sure that he does so. We'll have to wait to see exactly how the ANC is going to manage this situation. It is historic, it's unprecedented. I've got with me here on the midday view, they agreed graciously to stay on, to continue to talk to us as we unpack this. I've got Dubazana, attorney's legal expert, Nthabiseng Dubazana, Helen Suzman Foundation's legal counsellor, Anton van Dalsen. They were friends of the court in this particular matter that's been concluded by the Constitutional Court, and former public protector, Professor Thuli Madonsela, and also political analyst, Prof. Sipho Seepe. I'm not so sure if you were able to hear or any of that, but basically that's really where the ANC is at now. Too early to formulate a particular position. They are studying the judgment, like many people are currently doing in the country. They will then discuss it at the National Executive Committee. But the matter remains whether or not, how the party is going to show its support for its former president and also the head of state. Just to get a sense for me when you're listening to that and as you're thinking, just as people who've been following all of this very closely, I mean, I don't know, how do you feel? What kind of position does this ruling now put the ANC and the man himself, the former president of the governing party? Can I start with you, Prof. Madonsela?
Thank you, Tim. I wouldn't like to be in the same position as the ANC because on the one hand, the ANC is the governing party and it falls upon its shoulders as a ruling party to ensure that the Constitution is respected and that a judgment of this nature is not only celebrated, but it is promoted because it is about the rule of law. On the other hand, the person who must go to jail is not only a member of the ANC, but somebody that was held up by the ANC to the nation and the world as one of the best among us, one of the most competent among us, and one of the least selfless among us, one who was there to uphold the Constitution. And now they have to have sympathy as human beings with this person and find ways to support the former president, Jacob Zuma, whilst at the same time driving confidence in the Constitution and our Constitutional Court.
Yeah, Helen Suzman Foundation, I know it's not your place, you're not a political party, but as an organization, I mean, you have your former head who was right there at the top, who took an oath not once but twice, and he swore to abide and respect and promote and even defend the Constitution of this republic, not once but twice, and now he's facing a 15-month imprisonment sentence. I mean, it must be difficult as an organization that is supposed to be upholding the rule of law, as Thuli Madonsela just reiterated a short while ago.
Yes, I think, even if one just looks at it historically, it puts the ANC in a very, very difficult position. And I think the challenge that they have is to try and convince people that people who have positions of influence in the ANC do not regard themselves as above the law, because that is the thing that has come out so strongly in this whole case, is that Mr. Zuma continuously seems to have felt that he was not bound by the laws of the country.
He kept on also saying, but he's got rights as well. Prof. Seepe, he kept on reminding us, but what about my rights to be heard fairly at the commission? I have this close relationship with the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. But the ANC is finding itself now having to deal with the aftermath or the outcome of this ruling. And they've got this National Executive Committee that's coming up. It's politically, it's going to become a hot potato. Or am I wrong, Prof. Seepe?
Yeah, I think we can mislead ourselves into thinking that all is well, and the manner in which this thing was handled, South Africans think it is actually fair. The people we still want to see something that says justice is seen to be done. We can talk all about the rule of law. And as for the ANC, as Thuli does indicate, they are in a difficult position. And of course, when one of us errs or goes on the wrong side of the law, we don't throw them into the dustbin. We show sympathy and hope that there'll be lessons that will be learned out of this. But what is most important, it's also that no one is above the law. But even as we say that, we still want to see that it is a matter that all of us can easily support. But when there's a tinge of suggestions that says, what if the review application succeeded? What if it found that the Justice Zondo, as some members of the ANC in the executive had actually even suggested that the manner in which he was handling this, it had become personal. What if that is true? So there's still that level of doubt. So we can still raise that issue, but we need to, as we talk about constitutionalism, we must also be in a situation where it can all be embraced. But I can assure you, the former president will go to jail, and he has indicated that he is not afraid to go there. But it will not remove. We can't be all satisfied and be excited when there are some questions. But here, we can all say he has been given a lot of chance, and the ANC has tried to prevail. But what will happen is, this is a precedent that has been set, and if the message was to send a message that no one is above the law, that message has been sent. But let us talk about all the other issues that are not on the table.
Yeah, they were not in this case. I understand that. Nthabiseng, as an attorney, what does justice is being done look like to you? If your client says to you, make sure that in my case there, justice must be seen to be done. So what would it look like?
Well, from my perspective, I'm a criminal defense attorney. So justice for me, for my client in those instructions would be to ensure that he doesn't end up having a custodial sentence. So my argument for him, if I was given those instructions, would be, let us put forth reasons, mitigating factors as to why we should not be granted a custodial sentence. But in this situation, in this specific case, no mitigating factors were provided from Dr. Zuma's side. And as a result, the court had nothing else to look for in terms of whether or not this thing should, the application by the commission should be challenged or not. We are looking at a situation whereby, maybe if I were to say it in terms of normal court procedure, when you mitigate, you're giving personal circumstances of the accused, other surrounding circumstances, the interests of justice, all of those things to influence the court in going into your side, in giving your side the preferent ruling. So in this situation, what other choice did the court have but to go to the ruling or to the side of the commission? Perhaps looking at other alternative forms of sentencing would have been best. But as it is, the precedent has been set. So it is a matter of maybe from now on, when a client gives me instructions, I just let them know that the court has decided that it can be 15 months for contempt of court. So be careful not to miss a day in court. Yeah,
as Professor Seepe said, Mr. Zuma will end up in jail for these 15 months because there's no other court he can go to now to try and plead his case. That door is firmly shut from a legal perspective. Is that correct, Nthabiseng?
Very correct. The Constitutional Court is the apex court. There's nowhere else we can go. He has to go and serve his time. So now it is a matter of whether in those 15 months, parole will be considered when he gets to about 6-7 months or so. And then he'll probably be released unless there are other conditions that are now preempted and then he gets released early. But parole should be around about 7 or so months and then he would be released. And then the matter can, and then he can continue with his life. The question though, that I'm wondering is that what happens to, I know it's not part of this topic, but what happens to cases like the arms deal? Will he then be made to go and appear? Will he be driven there? You know, considering what happens currently in courts pertaining to COVID, it will be very interesting how other matters where he's supposed to appear will be handled.
And that matter is supposed to be coming up in the Pietermaritzburg High Court sometime in July. From what I remember, we'll have to watch that space and see it. Okay, we're going to be concluding shortly. I just could not pick up on one point as we conclude, just your final reflections. I'm just thinking here for everything that we know about this case, and for the fact that some other issue, like Professor Seepe has spoken out about that whole issue of that relationship with the Deputy Chief Justice on what was never tested, but everything else and how this has played itself out, and the importance of the State Capture Commission finishing its inquiries, having had all testimonies properly. I'm just thinking I'm looking at the figure now of a man, a South African leader like Jacob Zuma, a veteran of the struggle, who spent many years on Robben Island, went into exile, fought for liberation of this country, was head of state over 2 terms, then got caught up. I'm just using that expression very loosely. Please forgive me for that. Got caught up in this issue of the Guptas and everything else. And Professor Thuli Madonsela, you were public protector. You did your state of capture report, which led us to the Commission of Inquiry. When you look back at that, you use the word we must celebrate the thing, and the Professor Seepe said, hey, maybe there are other issues here we shouldn't be celebrating. But if you look at this and you look at the supremacy of the Constitution, I mean, you must feel sad somehow, somewhere, at a human level, for Jacob Zuma, or is that too much of a human emotion at this stage? We should either be saying rule of law, that's it. I mean, we know that Lady Justice, is blind, and the rule of law can be very tough. Or is there some level of human thing to think? I mean, he was a liberator. He was a freedom fighter. Prof. Madonsela, can I have you reflecting on that as we close first? And all of you, I'm going to ask you to have some parting thoughts around the statement I've just made.
I agree with you. Personally, I was extremely sad when this judgment was passed. As I said to you, I said the same thing to the Tuma Foundation team on WhatsApp. It's a sad day. It's a sad day at a human level. For me personally, it's also sad because I've known President Zuma for a long time, liked him, and had a good relationship with him. Sad as I may be, also, it is something that he and his lawyers could have prevented this sadness. And I agree with Prof. Seepe that justice must not only be done, but it must be seen to be done. I know that President Zuma knew he had a relationship with the Deputy Chief Justice before he appointed him. Why didn't he disclose that relationship then and indicate that it is a conflict of interest? That's number one. But secondly, the Constitutional Court went beyond the call of duty. You will remember that the Chief Justice even wrote to President Zuma above the normal process before sentencing to say, this is where we are now. Will you please submit your own representations? There was a decision between him and his lawyers to do nothing. And therefore, the Constitutional Court had to make sure that we all abide by the rule of law. It is said that it had to come to this.
Thanks, Professor Thuli Madonsela. Anton, your thoughts? Anton van Dalsen from the Helen Suzman Foundation.
Yes, thank you. Now, just following on your comments, I think the only statement I would make is what is important for me is that what comes out of all of this is that you are subject to the law, and it doesn't matter how important you are and what you've achieved in your life, you still remain subject to the law. I think that's the issue that we should focus on.
And no one is above the law. I guess that's the point you are making there. Prof. Seepe, your parting thoughts?
Well, I could only concur with Professor Madonsela, and also saying that because I know she had a good relationship with the former president, and we should all be saddened by when one of us say fall by the wayside is not something to celebrate, and that there are lessons to be learned, and the issue of that justice must be seen to be served is still, for me, critical. And I also want to say, in as much as I agree with Professor Madonsela on the issue that the former president knew of the relationship that he had with Zondo, the problem comes when there becomes a quarrel around issues of facts, because that begins to, it's where Advocate Skakani was very concerned that now we're getting to a stage where the chair and the person appearing are quarreling about issues of facts. This is where the issue of conflict comes in. So be that as it may, he made the call, he agreed to his appointment, and what we should be saying is that how else can we do it better in such a way that when a judgment is made, people do not think that the court has acted in a manner that is driven by irritation or vindictiveness or protecting one of their own. Because even as much as we talk about the rule of law, there is a slippery road where we can talk about the rule of the judges. So this is where I think this case, when we think about it, will be very interesting in terms of what else could have been done differently to make sure that we are all satisfied, that no niggling feelings and concerns.
Yeah, and that's a nice point to bring you in, Nthabiseng, as we conclude from a legal. And you are the youngest amongst us here, the panel. And I mean, you see this whole issue involving leadership in the country. And from a legal perspective, what would be your parting thoughts on the comments I'd made at a human level, or that has no room, no space in the rule of law?
No, I think a human level is imperative in actual fact, because in any sentencing of any matter that at least I've been a part of, that element is considered. Hence, the personal circumstances of the accused person is always considered when giving a sentence. So on a human level, it is very sad to see Dr. Zuma being handed over to the prison and, having to go serve a sentence. But also in the same breath, I feel like also his legal team ought to have tried to mitigate the situation specifically for this case. Pertaining to the recusal of Ndata Zondo, there's already a pending matter there. We still are waiting to hear how that works out, like my colleague has said, and how it would affect, how it could have affected this situation. Would have been very nice to see how it works out. But now at this stage that we're at, I feel like there should have been some way to try and mitigate the issue of the accused on Ndata Zuma in this matter getting a higher or a worse sentence that he already is facing. So it is very sad in that element.
Okay, no, thank you very much, Nthabiseng, Dubazana. Thank you, Professor Sipho Seepe, Professor Thuli Madonsela, and Anton van Dalsen. I mean, all of you at such short notice. It is a bigger story. It's still developing. It's early hours, so to speak. There'll be lots more being said about it. We're going to hear a lot what's going to be happening in the next few days, and I appreciate your time. But I guess the agreement overall, where we are today, is that the rule of law above everything else. I think there's been agreement there, but we need to have that justice to be seen to be done, was also an overwhelming thought, but that none of us are above the law. And I think that's the biggest message, the strongest message that the court wanted to send today. And some people will say, well, there is hope for us in a constitutional democracy if the rule of law still applies to everybody. Sadly, it happened to be a former head of state this time around. Thank you very much. Take care and do stay safe. By the way, we are still in the third wave of the coronavirus. Take care of yourselves. Thank you very much to my panel there that were with us from after 2 o'clock. That was Dubazana, attorney's legal expert, Nthabiseng Dubazana, Helen Suzman, Foundation's legal counsellor, Anton van Dalsen. They were a friend of the court in this matter, the contempt court matter involving the former president, former public protector, Professor Thuli Madonsela, and, of course, political analyst, Professor Sipho Seepe. I can assure you there'll be much more analysis coming up as we all chew on this over the next few hours, few days.